Heart Attack in Vinyl. Chapter 1, Fire and Ash. The abandoned apartment complex sat baking beneath an unforgiving sun, its brick exterior blistered and streaked with rust where broken fire escapes once sagged. Heat hung in dank stairwells and slender hallways, trapped and rancid, rendering the air thick enough to taste. Wallpaper peeled in brittle, jagged strips, exposing cracked paint beneath. Trash collected in corners as insects buzzed through shattered glass. The building smelled of decay, mildew, and neglect, a suffocating mix, oppressive and cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. James slumped against the cracked wall of their makeshift squat, a used syringe lying forgotten on the stained linoleum floor. The last of his high pulled him towards sleep, heavy and warm, blurring the edges of the room and reality itself. Bethany leaned back in the corner, her body numb, her eyes dull and unfocused, as she pressed play on the battered boombox beside her. The cassette tape clicked and hissed. Life is Real's Song for Lennon began, steady and repetitive, something she could cling to. Her fingers drummed lightly on the tabletop. She needed the music to anchor her, to keep her tethered to something solid while everything else slid and warped and threatened to disappear. Outside, New York groaned under the weight of August. In here, the world had shrunk to 4 walls, a stained mattress, and the faint melody of shared oblivion. An inquisitive, unbathed boy toddled barefoot across the splintered floor, his toy piano clutched in one arm. He was small but long-limbed, awkward for age 3 in a way that made him look unfinished, like the world asked more of him than time had allowed. Jet-black hair hung into bright blue eyes, tangled and untrimmed, his face streaked with grime from the floor and his own hands. He wore a stained white Queen t-shirt far too large for him, the bottom roughly cut away, the hem uneven and fraying so it wouldn't drag under his feet. Beneath it, a tattered diaper, creased and murky, that had seen too many floors. The piano was small and light. Cheap blue plastic scuffed at the corners, the paint worn thin where his fingers touched it most. Its keys were uneven shades of white and yellow, some chipped, some permanently smudged. A faded sticker stretched across the front, cartoon animals dancing beneath floating musical notes, smiling in a way that felt loud even when the toy was not. He clanged at the keys absently, humming to himself, drifting from room to room like a quiet ghost. The notes rang soft and clear in the empty building, bouncing off walls, blending with the distant song of an approaching storm. Bethany and James didn't notice. They wouldn't have noticed if he disappeared entirely. A sudden clap of thunder shook the building. Rain lashed against broken windows, drumming over the toy piano's delicate notes. The toddler giggled and bounced in place, delighted, as if the storm itself were joining his band. Then came a flash, sharp and white, as lightning struck the roof. A roar followed, deep and violent. The top floor shuddered as dust fell from the ceiling. Bethany and James barely moved. Somewhere above, a small spark ignited dry wood. Smoke curled down the building's hollow spine, thin at first, almost playful, then heavier, choking. The boy didn't notice. He tapped his white and yellow keys, wandering, fascinated by the echo of his piano. The burning smell reached him suddenly, a faint, pungent tinge that made his nose wrinkle. He looked up. The crackle of wood invaded the air as dark gray smoke crept along the filthy walls, sliding downward like something alive. Bethany moaned, half-conscious, eyes fluttering. James muttered, rolling over on the floor. Neither saw the smoke. The fire spread slowly, creeping along, scorching paint, eating carpet. Flames danced above them, moving toward the hallways where the tiny musician had drifted. His dirty hands trembled as he stepped toward a stairwell. Something instinctive, a whisper of fear he couldn't name, made him enter. The stairwell smelled of urine and damp concrete. It was narrow, dark, a tunnel of shadow. The toddler tucked himself into a corner, hugging his toy, listening as the fire gnawed its way downward. The building groaned and shuddered, paint blistering and falling in dense sheets. Smoke thickened. Heat warmed the stairwell entrance. He couldn't move. Fear rooted him in place. He could only huddle, playing his piano in short, uneven bursts, the notes dissolving into the haze. Outside, lightning cracked again as distant sirens wailed. A crowd gathered, drawn by the glow and roar. Firefighters arrived minutes later, though the fire had already grown into a monster of smoke and flame. They tore through the building to find the toddler motionless, eyes red from toxic fumes, a tiny figure crouched in the corner of a stairwell, his toy piano in hand. He was alive. His parents were not. Nobody spoke of Bethany or James after that. There were no relatives, no neighbors, no funeral, no one to claim a small, unharmed, frightened boy. The tragedy had taken the building, and with it, everything he had known. The firemen found the toddler petrified. He looked less like a survivor and more like a remnant of the discarded architecture. A pair of rough hands lifted him onto a stretcher as emergency lights blazed relentlessly. He clutched the toy piano to his queen-covered chest. It was the only thing left of a world that had burned away. Somewhere in that hazy smoke and ungodly heat, buried beneath trauma he wouldn't remember for years, a tiny spark of sound, the first note of a gift he had not yet begun to understand, survived. The hospital reeked of antiseptic and exhaustion, sharp and sterile. Flickering lights hummed low overhead as the boy lay small and scared on a narrow bed, the toy piano against his body like a talisman of protection. Every time the nurse moved, he flinched and instinctively pressed the keys. Fragmented notes lingered in the quiet room. She watched, unsure what to call him. Paperwork demanded a name. "We can't keep calling him the Fire Kid," the nurse said, frowning at the blank space on the chart. "What should I put?" "I don't know. How about Ash?" the other nurse quipped. "Ash," the first nurse questioned, testing it aloud. She crouched slightly, voice gentle. "Ash," she repeated. "Do you like that?" The boy didn't respond in words. His fingers pressed the keys again, soft and deliberate, like an acknowledgement only he could make. "Okay," she said, scribbling the name on the chart. "Ash it is, short and simple." The second nurse nodded, watching him tap the keys again. "Sounds good." By the end of the week, Ash was bundled into a used AMC Gremlin, the toy piano tucked under his arm, and driven to a place that would become home. The house was cramped, and the walls were stained yellow from nicotine and cheap paint. The atmosphere felt dense with overcooked noodles and cleaning products that never quite worked. His new guardians barely glanced at him. Their smiles were tight, practiced. Money had drawn them to foster care. They would never have taken on a mouth to feed if it didn't come with a check. Afternoons were meager and quiet, heavy with stale air, drawn curtains, and the hum of old appliances. Ash played in the living room, his little fingers punching the keys with serious concentration. No melody, just noise. The sounds were high and erratic, repeating without sense or mercy. The woman flinched from the kitchen doorway. "Oh, Jesus," she muttered, pressing her fingers to her temple. "Not again." Her husband faced her quickly. "What's wrong?" he said. "Do you need your medicine?" A sharp pain bloomed behind her eyes, white and throbbing. She slammed a cabinet harder than she meant to. Ash didn't look up. He pressed another key, then 3 at once. He smiled. The woman crossed the room in quick steps, crouched, and slid the piano away. "Not now." Ash reached for it, confused. He made a small sound, not quite a word. Her voice tightened. "I said no." Her husband returned from the bathroom with pills in one hand and a glass of water in the other. She grabbed them both without hesitation. "It's like someone stabbing the inside of my skull." She set the piano on top of the bookcase, out of reach. Ash stood there a long moment, looking upward, fingers still curved like they remembered the keys. The room felt wrong without the toy. His hands hovered, unsure where to go. On the verge of tears, Ash watched them, but he didn't cry. That evening, the house held a hollow weight. Ash lay on the thin mattress they had given him, twitching under the blanket, pressing imaginary buttons. He made no sound. The next afternoon, she brought the piano back. "Only in your room," she said, already tired. "And quietly, understand." Ash didn't really, but he nodded anyway. Music became something he kept to himself. Not because he understood rules or punishment or kindness, but because the house felt better when the sound was small. Because loud notes made faces tighten and voices sharpen. Because quiet meant everything stayed calm. On the floor of his small bedroom, door closed, the piano resting between his knees, Ash pressed the keys carefully now, softer, learning which notes could be touched without making the air vibrate too much. Learning when to stop. Learning how to fold sound inward and listen more than he played. The blue toy piano stayed with him, its chipped keys and its smiling cartoon animals slowly wearing away. But the noise he made with it grew smaller, more private. Long before Ash had words for it, his body learned a lesson. Quiet felt safer.